The chilly, early autumn morning of 2019 began with an unusual disturbance on Pine Ridge Road, Prattville, Alabama. 6 unmarked police cars quietly pulled up in front of a modest 2-story wooden house at the end of the street. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, whispering as they saw agents in bulletproof vests spreading out around the porch. Inside, Hank Doyle, an 83-year-old former Clay County sheriff, was brewing his morning coffee, a habit he'd maintained for nearly 3 decades since retiring. In the town, the name Doyle once stood for honor, discipline, and justice. He was the man Lineville trusted implicitly, the one who protected them through every crisis. At 6:27 a.m., urgent knocks echoed through the house. "Mr. Hank Doyle, Alabama Bureau of Investigation. We have a warrant to search your home and arrest you in connection with the 1981 disappearance of Rebecca Lang." Agents later recounted that the old man's hand trembled slightly as he set down his coffee cup, but his face remained eerily calm, as if he had been preparing for this moment for a long time. On the morning of August 14, 1981, sunlight stretched across the dirt road leading into Lineville. Rebecca Lang, a 19-year-old waitress at the Highway Diner, finished her shift at 10:45 p.m. and drove off in her yellow Mustang from the parking lot. She never made it home. The next morning, her bed was empty, her coffee cup cold, and her car was gone. Her mother called everyone. No one knew where Rebecca was. At 8:17 a.m., she reported it to the police. The desk officer noted briefly, "Missing female, 19." Sheriff Hank Doyle personally visited the Langs' home, inspected the scene, and led the search. Police found unfamiliar tire tracks, a few scraps of denim fabric, and later, the Mustang abandoned by the Tallapoosa River, doors locked, lights off, no blood, no body. Doyle's preliminary conclusion: no foul play found. Case file #81274 was closed. 4 years later, a bridge construction crew discovered human bones in the riverbank mud. Forensic report: female, approximately 18-22 years old, skull pierced by a .38 caliber bullet hole. No identification, no personal items. The body was labeled Jane Doe #8507 and buried in Potter's Field. Doyle signed the report, walked away, and never sent the file to the state. The case faded into oblivion for 38 years. Then, in 2018, in a dusty archive in Montgomery, clerk Emily Carter stumbled upon a typo: unidentified female remains. A single misspelled letter had erased the entire case from the national database. When Emily reopened the file, the buried truth began to resurface, and Rebecca Lang's name emerged for the first time in nearly 4 decades. From a preserved hair sample, retired DNA expert Noah Green extracted a genetic sequence, ran it through GED Match, and found a match with the Lang family in Huntsville. Test results confirmed Jane Doe #8507 was Rebecca Lang. But what shocked investigators most was that the bullet in her skull perfectly matched a Smith & Wesson Model 10, serial number 38127, a gun registered to Hank Doyle, the very man who led the 1981 search. For decades, Doyle was celebrated as a hero, an emblem of Alabama justice, attending memorials for missing persons and speaking on duty and trust. No one suspected that, during those very ceremonies, the man wearing the sheriff's badge was hiding the deepest truth. How did a revered sheriff evade his own guilt for nearly 40 years? What made a small typo bring justice back from the shadows? And how many other truths still lie dormant in Alabama's dusty filing cabinets? Before we reveal how investigators tracked down the killer after thousands of dead ends, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here you'll hear about the most shocking true crime cases in America, where justice sometimes arrives late, but never fades. Lineville, Alabama, the night of August 14, 1981. The summer heat lingered in the air as the neon lights of the Highway Diner dimmed at 10:45 p.m. Rebecca Lang, 19 years old, wiped her hands on her apron. said a final goodbye to her coworkers, and stepped out into the empty parking lot. The asphalt was still damp with evening dew, the hum of cicadas and crickets blending with the faint drone of the distant highway. Her yellow Mustang roared to life, its headlights casting long beams across the roadside trees. Rebecca turned onto the narrow dirt road along Blackwood Creek, the route she took home every night. In the distance, Alabama's sky flickered with dark clouds, reflecting faintly on the water like a cold streak of light. As her car vanished around the bend, no one saw her again. The next morning, in a small house on the edge of town, the clock on the wall read 7:12. Mrs. Lang woke to find her daughter's room untouched, bed made, coffee cup cold on the kitchen counter. In the garage, the space where the car usually parked held only a patch of dry dust. She called Rebecca's coworkers at the diner, her friends, the neighbor across the street. No one had seen her since the previous night. The house grew unnaturally quiet, save for the steady ticking of the clock. Mrs. Lang sank into a chair, hands trembling as she clutched the phone, took a deep breath, and dialed the Clay County Sheriff's Office. The ringing stretched on, each tone pounding in her chest. When a deep male voice answered, she spoke softly, her voice breaking with fear. "Clay County Sheriff's Office, my daughter's missing." Mrs. Lang's words echoed in the silence after the call. On the other end, the desk officer jotted down notes and transferred the call to the main office. At 8:17 a.m., Sheriff Hank Doyle had just walked into his office when the report came. Missing female, 19 years old, name Rebecca Lang. He paused at his desk, pulled a pen from his pocket, and scribbled a few words on a report form. His face showed no emotion, his voice gruff as he ordered, "Send 2 men to verify. Start at the house, then her workplace." Deputies Miller and Hensley immediately headed out in their patrol car. The road to the Lang's house was quiet, morning fog still clinging to the pines. The small house at the end of Magnolia Street stood with its door open. Mrs. Lang waiting on the porch, her face pale. Inside, Rebecca's room was chillingly tidy. Blankets folded, dresser closed, phone still in its place. Miller looked around and asked about the girl's habits, her friends, her nightly route. Mrs. Lang could only manage fragments, her voice faltering. She got off work at 10:45, always took Blackwood Creek. Just 10 minutes to get home. Hensley took notes and asked for a portrait photo from the wall. Less than 20 minutes later, they were at the highway diner. The glass door was fogged with condensation, the air thick with the smell of grease and coffee. The owner, Grace Whitmore, confirmed Rebecca left alone, wearing her green uniform and jeans, saying she was going straight home. Another employee recalled her grabbing her purse from the counter before leaving. No one noticed anything unusual. Miller jotted it down, his eyes scanning the parking lot out back. Neon lights off, only faint tire marks on the gravel. "It didn't rain last night," Grace said, "but it was humid, lots of dew." Doyle, meanwhile, was at the station receiving updates via radio. He nodded and said curtly, "Check the entire Blackwood Creek route. She had to go that way." At 9:50, the patrol team left the diner. Along the winding road through the pine forest, the air carried the scent of damp earth and sharp sap. Hensley drove slowly, eyes glued to the road. Near the third curve, he hit the brakes. "See something?" Miller asked. "Strange tire marks, dug in pretty deep." They stepped out, measuring the tracks. The spacing was narrower than a Mustang's. Nearby, wild grass was flattened in a long streak, as if something heavy had been dragged through. A scrap of blue fabric hung on a low branch. Miller carefully plucked it off, slipping it into a paper bag. "Denim," he said, "like jeans material." They marked the spot and radioed the station. Doyle arrived at the scene at 11 o'clock. He stepped out of his car, put on his hat, and crouched to inspect the ground, still damp. The second set of tire marks clearly didn't match. He scanned the area, squinting against the harsh sun. The road was empty, no houses nearby, only the hum of cicadas and the distant sound of the Tallapoosa River. "Preserve everything," he said. "Set stakes, Tape it off. Miller drove wooden stakes into the ground, stringing yellow tape. Doyle pulled the radio from his belt, calling the station. Get me a topo map of this area. I want to check the section near the bridge. His voice was calm, but his eyes lingered on the crushed grass. A familiar instinct, honed by years as a cop, told him this wasn't a runaway case. Noon sun glared down, the road shimmering with heat. Doyle walked a few steps toward the woods, his boots sinking slightly into the damp earth, then stopped. Drag marks, he said quietly. Miller nodded, placing another stake. Doyle checked his watch and told Hensley to report back to the station and bring a Polaroid camera to photograph the scene. He stood alone, staring down the empty road. The distant rumble of a truck faded into the wind. At 12:48, Miller's radio crackled, then Hensley's urgent voice came through. Central, this is Unit 3, possible abduction site, located along Blackwood Creek. Marked and secured. Awaiting instructions. Doyle raised the mic, his voice low and clipped. Copy that. Hold the perimeter. I'm on my way. He strode to his car, started the engine, tires crunching wet gravel, the sound echoing through the forest. Above, heavy clouds drifted slowly, casting a cold silver light on the river. Rebecca Lang's disappearance had officially become an investigation. By nearly 1 o'clock, the distant hum of an engine approached, and a white Clay County forensics van pulled up to the yellow tape. The air was thick with the smell of gas and road dust. Doyle stood with arms crossed, watching as 3 men in light jackets stepped out, carrying toolkits and cameras. Document everything, no detail missed, he said, his voice firm. They began measuring, marking each tire track embedded in the soft earth. One technician scraped up mud samples and snapped 3 Polaroid shots. The skid mark stretched nearly 10 meters, then stopped abruptly where the ground rose, as if the vehicle had halted suddenly. Doyle crouched, running his fingers through the dark soil, feeling fine gravel and limestone fragments. Not the Mustang's tires, he said firmly. Tread patterns completely different. A technician measured the track spacing, then checked a handbook. 1,470 mm, Firestone 15-inch, likely a late 70s pickup. Doyle took notes, his eyes fixed on the distance. A breeze carried the faint fishy smell of the river. What's a pickup doing out here that night? He muttered, almost to himself. They followed the road, finding the tire marks repeated twice more at turns, as if the vehicle had stopped and turned around. 50 meters from the scene, in low grass near wild blackberry bushes, a team member spotted a boot print, large, size 11, with a pattern typical of work boots or military issue. The prints led toward the river, where the terrain sloped, blending into the weeds. A man, tall, long strides, the forensic tech said, measuring the gaps. No skids or running marks, pretty calm steps. Doyle signaled to photograph it without a word. He looked toward the Tallapoosa, its surface glinting in the noon light, and noticed a bare patch in the grass, a round indentation, as if someone had knelt there. Miller returned, reporting no personal items or blood found after checking another 100 yards. No blood trace, only disturbance on soil, he said. Doyle looked up, his gaze heavy. No blood, but someone stood here a long time, he replied, pointing to the flattened earth with overlapping footprints. A strong gust swept through, making the yellow tape flutter, its rustle blending with the leaves. The forensic team collected soil samples, labeling each bag. A technician removed more denim threads from a low branch, sealing them in a brown envelope. Doyle scribbled quickly, flipping his notebook. Denim fabric, long fibers, dark blue, possibly from victim's jeans. He paused, scanning the area again, then said, no drag marks. If she was attacked here, she was either carried off or vanished into the water. A young forensic tech asked, should we search the riverbank now, sir? Doyle nodded. Start here, extend 2 miles along the Tallapoosa. Call in the boats and K9 unit, check both banks. Miller radioed the station at once. Doyle watched his Crown Victoria reflect the sunlight, its red southern dust coating the hood. He wiped sweat with a handkerchief, his eyes fixed on the empty road where the strange tire marks led to the woods and vanished. By mid-afternoon, the expanded search team arrived. 2 scent dogs were released near the water, barking loudly before turning back. A technician reported, "No strong scent, it might have washed away." Doyle squinted at the murky river, clouded from last week's rain. He knew the Tallapoosa was deep enough to swallow any trace. "If someone was dumped in there, we won't see a body soon," he said softly, his voice nearly lost in the wind. On the way back, he stopped at the first stake, watching the yellow tape quiver in the fading light. The tire marks remained clear, the soil darkened by moisture. Doyle lit a cigarette, smoke drifting across his view. "That girl was here," he said, as if to himself. "And someone else was too." Miller nodded silently. They packed up, folding the map. Before leaving, Doyle turned to the forensic team. "Get the soil and fabric samples to the lab. I want results as soon as possible." As the patrol car pulled away from Blackwood Creek, the sun dipped low, bathing the forest in gold. The wind rustled through the pines, carrying a dry, scratchy sound. Behind them, the quiet road stood with its wooden stakes and yellow tape swaying like a silent reminder of a girl who vanished from the town without a word. The next morning, thick fog blanketed the Tallapoosa River. The yellow tape around the scene was still damp, swaying lightly in the breeze. Doyle was there before dawn, holding a steaming coffee, eyes tracing the dirt road to the water's edge. The hum of engines approached, followed by fire trucks, patrol cars, and 2 small boats from the Randolph County Rescue Team pulling up. "Search 2 miles along both banks," he ordered. "1 team by boat, 1 on the west trail. Use dogs around the tire mark area." The K-9 unit's barks echoed as they were released. The air reeked of mud and rotting leaves. Men in rubber coats waited along the riverbank, probing the mud with long poles. Doyle followed closely, scanning the treetops where sunlight hadn't yet reached. Every few minutes, he jotted in his notebook. No tracks, no items, no distinct scent. The river lay still, like a silver mirror. Near noon, as the second team swept downstream, Hensley's voice crackled over the radio, sharp through the wind. "Unit 4 calling Central, we've got a vehicle. Yellow Mustang, license 4B7129. It's here." Doyle strode quickly toward the old wooden bridge where the road sloped to a narrow bank. Among the reeds, a pale yellow shape glinted in the sunlight. Rebecca's Mustang sat tilted by the water, caked in dust, 1 front wheel sunk deep in mud. Doors locked, headlights off. Driver's side window cracked a few inches. A dry leaf was caught in the frame. Doyle touched the hood, cold, indicating it had been there at least a night. He signaled to cordon off the area, then examined the tire marks. No skid, just straight tracks, stopping abruptly. Hensley pried the door open with a tool. A sharp click sounded, and the car's stale air carried hints of old plastic and dampness. The interior was eerily tidy, an empty purse on the passenger seat, nothing but old receipts in the cash compartment. A thin denim jacket in the back, its collar dusted with dirt. Doyle leaned in. The driver's seat was pushed back, the steering wheel lower than usual, not the position for Rebecca, a girl barely 5 feet tall. He said softly, "Someone else sat here." Forensic techs snapped photos, their flashes flickering. A team member found a small fabric scrap outside the door, caked in mud. Doyle picked it up with tweezers, laying it on white paper, dark blue denim, fibers matching yesterday's find at the tire mark site. Same color, same material, a tech confirmed. Doyle nodded, saying nothing. They scoured the area around the car. The mud was deep, no drag marks, no skids. A few steps from the water, faint boot prints, large, led to the river and vanished. Doyle stood still, staring at the rippling water. "If a body was swept away, it'd be downstream in hours," he said. Miller replied, "This current's strong, sir. If she fell, she wouldn't surface soon." Doyle nodded slightly, his gaze on the murky flow. Rescue boats deployed, dragging nets along both banks. The hum of small engines, mixed with waves lapping the hulls, under the blazing sun, sweat soaked everyone's shirts. Iron poles probed the riverbed, stirring only mud and debris. Nothing but water and heavy silence. By late afternoon, the search spanned nearly 2 miles with no new traces. An officer handed Doyle a report. No blood trace, only disturbance on soil. He folded the paper, exhaling slowly. His eyes drifted to the Mustang, still tilted by the bank, mud drying around its tires. All evidence pointed to one theory: Rebecca stopped here, or was forced to, then vanished. The sun sank behind the pines, casting a faint red glow on the river. Doyle stood by the car, hand on its roof, silent for a long time. The team dispersed, leaving only the hum of evening insects. Hensley spoke up. "Should we keep searching tonight, sir?" Doyle shook his head. No wind shifted. "If something's in the water, we won't see it." He pulled off his gloves, tossed them into the tech van, voice hoarse. "She might have fallen in." He said it like closing a long day, but there was a hesitation in his tone. On the drive back, he turned on the radio, the desk officer's voice cutting through static. "Search operation concluded for today. Vehicle secured. Missing person file remains open." He switched it off, staring out the window at the town's distant yellow lights against a deep purple sky. In the last light of day, he knew this case wouldn't end with a simple explanation. From the moment the Mustang was pulled from the bank, Rebecca Lang's file had officially become a suspected criminal case. 10 days after Rebecca Lang vanished, the yellow tape around Blackwood Creek was fraying, its black lettering faded under the sun. The search continued, but exhaustion hung over the team. From early morning, 30 volunteers, farmers, high school students, a few local church members gathered at the Tallapoosa Bridge where the Mustang was found. Small motorboats churned the water in rows. Canine dogs roamed both banks, noses low, barking briefly before falling silent. Overhead, a state patrol light plane circled, its lens scanning the murky river. Everyone hoped for a sign, however small, a scrap of cloth, an item, anything to follow. But day after day, the river gave back only mud, debris, and wind. That afternoon, Doyle stood by the bridge, notebook in hand. Under the harsh sun, deep lines creased his eyes. A rescue worker approached, shaking his head. "Nothing, sir. We've swept all the way downstream." Doyle replied softly, "I know." He watched the fast-moving water, breathing in the damp, earthy smell of the land. "If she's down there," he said, "the river's carried her farther than we think." Miller stepped up, removing his hat, sweat staining his collar. "Should we stop, sir?" 10 days, no traces, no witnesses. "Maybe she left." Doyle didn't answer, just closed his notebook. Meanwhile, rumors spread through Lineville, unavoidable in a small town. At the diner, in the grocery store, people whispered that Rebecca had run off with a boyfriend, that she was in Florida with someone. Some claimed they saw her fueling up at a station off the highway 2 days after she vanished, though no one had proof. Doyle heard the stories through locals and stayed silent, not correcting them. He didn't want to waste manpower on a case that seemed to lack a real crime. "A 19-year-old girl goes where she wants," he told Hensley in a small meeting room. "No blood, no signs of a struggle, no witnesses. I can't keep dredging Alabama's rivers forever." The report sent to the county office on August 24th ended with a typed line, "No foul play found. Possible voluntary disappearance." Below was Hank Doyle's scrawled signature. The file, coded 81274, was tucked into a gray folder, stored in a cabinet at the back of the room. No formal case closure, just the thud of an old metal drawer and its echo in the quiet office. The Lang family didn't accept it. Mrs. Lang visited the sheriff's office 3 times the following week, each time bringing photos, newspaper clippings, and homemade flyers reading, "Missing Rebecca Lang, 19, last seen on August 14, 1981. The last time, invited into Doyle's office, he sat behind his desk, flipping through papers before looking up. "We've done all we can, Mrs. Lang. There's no evidence this is a crime." She gripped the desk's edge, voice trembling. "You don't understand. She'd never leave. She left everything. Her job, her purse, her car, even her watch." Doyle avoided her eyes, saying softly, "I'm sorry." As she left, he sat still, touching the ink-damp report, his gaze briefly distant before closing the file without another word. In town, life resumed its cold routine. People stopped mentioning Rebecca, though some glanced at her empty seat at the diner and shook their heads. At night, Blackwood Creek grew quiet again. September's first rain washed away the tire marks, blurring the yellow paint on the caution tape. In the county office, the file cabinet stood cold, the 81-274 label nestled among hundreds of other cases, names, numbers, and a girl gone without a trace. On the final search day, Doyle stood by his office window, watching the rain-soaked yard. He unpinned his badge, wiped it, and reattached it. His eyes were tired, but his voice steady. "Close the file. Mark it voluntary disappearance." Miller nodded, folding the topographic map, marked with red lines, each a searched spot now meaningless. As the day's last light faded, Doyle turned off the office lamp, the door clicking shut. On the desk remained a cold coffee mug and a half-inch thick file, labeled CL 81-274. Outside, the Tallapoosa flowed on, silent, as if it had never held a thing. 4 years passed since Rebecca Lang's name vanished from Clay County's small newspapers. In April 1985, early sunlight gleamed on the Tallapoosa River, where a new bridge construction site buzzed with excavators and hammers striking steel. During a sweltering noon, workers dredging the muddy bank hit something hard. The dry clack of metal against bone startled the operator, who stopped. As the mud was cleared, an ivory-white object emerged, smooth as a river stone. Only when sunlight hit it did they realize it was a human skull. Word spread fast. The site halted within 15 minutes, and by the time the first police arrived, a crowd had gathered around the sunken earth. Sheriff Hank Doyle got the call that afternoon. He drove his old Crown Victoria to the site, flicking cigarette ash out the window, squinting at the river he'd had cordoned off 4 years earlier to search for Rebecca. The scene was almost unchanged: murky water, the sour smell of mud, and thick clusters of reeds. A young officer ran up. "Sir, the workers say they found more bones below, likely a full skeleton." Doyle nodded, saying nothing, and walked to the mud pit, outlined in white chalk. County Coroner Dr. Louis Carr was kneeling beside it, gloved, brushing dirt from the bones with a soft brush. He looked up as Doyle approached. Female, around 18 to 22 years old, pelvis and long bones are pretty clear. Doyle crouched, eyeing the skull tilted to one side, upper jaw still holding a few teeth. A clean round hole in the back of the head. Care signaled for a tech to bring evidence bags. Bullet wound, small caliber, looks like it went back to front. Likely .38 caliber, I'd guess. No soft tissue to pin time of death, but the bones are solid, so I'd say less than 10 years. Doyle stared at the hole in the skull, silent. He leaned closer, voice low, almost to himself. .38. That's a common round. Care added. Yeah. But odd thing is, no personal items, no bracelets, earrings, Idaho, or even clothing scraps. Whoever this was, they were cleaned up before being left here. Another tech chimed in, found some old nylon cord fragments around the wrist, could have been tied. Doyle noted it down, his handwriting neat. Female remains. Tallapoosa River construction site, possible homicide. That afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the pines, the skeletal remains were carefully collected, placed into large nylon bags, and transported to the county morgue. Doyle lingered by the riverbank, where workers had cleared the mud. At his feet, the water rippled, reflecting the flickering light of the half-built bridge. Miller, now working at a nearby city police department, stopped by in his car and asked quietly, "Think it could be that girl from back then?" Doyle gazed at the water and replied, "Not sure. 4 years on, no one's got any traces but a few papers." He lit a cigarette, the smoke drifting hazily into the air. The next day, preliminary autopsy results arrived at the Clay County office. The report was concise. 1 page, female, 18, 22 years old. Skull, fracture with gunshot wound, .38 caliber. No clothing, no jewelry, no personal effects. Estimated time of death, 7 years prior. Nothing to identify her. Doyle set the report on his desk, took a pen, and wrote in the top corner, Jane Doe #8507, unidentified. He paused, then closed the notebook, not sending it to Montgomery, as protocol required. No need to forward to the state, he told the FF. Keep the file in the county, could just be a drifter. That afternoon, a small wooden coffin holding the remains was taken to Potter's Field, the county's burial ground for the unidentified. Only 2 morgue workers and a hearse driver were present. No family, no flowers, no speeches. They buried her, placing a temporary metal marker, Jane Doe #8507, 1985. The river breeze carried damp air and the rusty smell of the bridge. Doyle stood a few steps away, watching the shovel pile earth over the grave. As the ground was leveled, he turned away, saying softly, "File it under 81-274, note no match, identity unknown." Back at the office, he sat at his desk, pulled out Rebecca Lang's old file from a drawer. The pages had yellowed, a coffee stain on the corner. He skimmed the first lines, missing female, 19, last seen 10:45 p.m., Highway Diner, Lineville. His eyes lingered on her black and white photo, then he snapped the file shut. A fleeting look crossed his face, regret or exhaustion, unclear. He pulled out a blank sheet and typed, "No known missing person matches the description. Filed as unidentified female. Case closed." The typewriter's steady clacks echoed in the small room. That evening, leaving the station, he saw his reflection in the dark glass, tired, heavy, far older than 4 years ago. The file's spine, labeled CL 81-274, blurred under the lamplight. Outside, the Tallapoosa flowed, cold and indifferent, as the day Rebecca vanished. No one at the station spoke of the bones again. A brief report was filed, numbered, sealed, and an unnamed woman, Jane Doe #8507, was hastily buried in Potter's Field, unknown and unclaimed. After the 1985 discovery, life in Clay County resumed as if nothing had happened. The Tallapoosa flowed beneath the new bridge. Cars passed daily, and Potter's Field grew quieter than ever. In the metal filing cabinet behind the sheriff's office, the Jane Doe #8507 file sat among petty thefts and traffic accidents, rarely touched. Occasionally, a new deputy would ask, "Sheriff Doyle, what about that woman's body by the river?" He'd shrug, curt. "No ID, no leads, no one's asking. Close it." Years passed. Doyle aged visibly, his hair graying, voice rougher and briefer. In 1992, he retired after 27 years. At a modest town hall farewell, he received a plaque and a commemorative badge. When a local reporter asked about his most haunting case, Doyle gave a faint smile. "It all ends up in the filing cabinet." No one noticed he added a note to the handover list, #8507. Transferred to Montgomery State Archive, cold storage. That fall, a state truck collected Clay County's old files, hundreds of boxes labeled in black marker. Among them, a small gray box holding Jane Doe #8507 evidence, sealed with silver tape, bore a yellowed label, "Unidentified female remains, Tallapoosa River, 1985. A single typo in unidentified went unnoticed. The box was stacked with others and driven to Montgomery's State Archive, a gray concrete building behind an industrial park, where thousands of old case files were stored in strict order, coded, dated, unquestioned. The 1990s brought slow changes to policing. Computers appeared in offices, data digitized. When NAMUS, the National Database for Missing Persons and Unidentified Remains, launched, Alabama was tasked with digitizing old files. Contracted clerks, mostly student interns, sifted through towering stacks, typing data into noisy computers. The identification status field required identified or unidentified. Typing unidentified female remains, Tallapoosa River, 1985, triggered a syntax error. A clerk marked it pending and moved on. No one fixed the typo. No one knew a single letter had erased #8507 from NAMUs. In Montgomery's cold storage basement, the evidence box sat untouched. The marker label faded, the silver tape frayed. Inside were a nylon bag with a skull and smaller bones, an envelope of light blonde hair, a distorted .38 caliber bullet labeled recovered from skull, and a dark denim scrap, cut with a knife. Once the only clues to a nameless case, they became relics of an outdated paper system. The storage room stayed at 16 degrees, smelling of damp paper, dust, and plastic bags. Each year, the keeper checked, marked verified, storage stable, and resealed it, unopened. In 1996, Doyle suffered a mild stroke. He moved to Prattville, a small house over 100 miles from the Tallapoosa. When a Clay Observer reporter asked about Rebecca Lang, he said, "I remember the case, but there's nothing to say. Maybe she left." Sometimes people choose to disappear. The reply became a footnote in an article on Alabama's unsolved mysteries. No one knew that in the cold archive, Rebecca's remains lay mislabeled and miscoded, slipping through every state identification system. The 2000s arrived, and Nameless expanded nationwide, digitizing thousands of Jane Doe and John Doe cases. Many identified via DNA, but #8507 never appeared. During data conversion, the pending unidentified entry was flagged invalid and skipped. The evidence box remained, dust thickening, label curling, the 1985 fading into a smudge. No one remembered, no one asked. The nameless girl by the Tallapoosa, who halted a construction crew, who left Doyle staring at murky water, was just a faded box in cold storage. And in Alabama's database, the typo persisted, unidentified female remains. One small error, one wrong letter, buried the truth for nearly 30 years. 33 years after the nameless girl's burial by the Tallapoosa, Alabama's Forensic Sciences Archive sat quietly in Montgomery, a gray building housing thousands of dusty files. In March 2018, Emily Carter, a meticulous archivist in her 50s, was reviewing backlog files for digitization. The work was tedious, flipping yellowed pages, scanning codes, typing data. That morning, amid a dense list of entries, she spotted an anomaly: unidentified female remains. Tallapoosa River, 1985. The extra N in unidentified triggered a red error. She tried correcting it, but the original data was locked. The linked file read, "Record not found." Emily hesitated, then checked the physical evidence log. Case #8507 appeared, but its description was blank. No photos, no handler info, no storage location. Impossible for the new system where every file needed an original record. She leaned back, uneasy. After 20 years, she knew a typo was rarely just a typo. It often meant a forgotten case. She went to the basement microfilm storage, a cold room smelling of old developing chemicals. After nearly 2 hours, she found a faint line on a reel. Jane Doe #8507, female remains. Tallapoosa County, possible homicide. The faded typewriter ink trembled, but was legible. She jotted it down and checked the evidence vault. The keeper, Johnson, consulted a paper log, as the old code didn't match the digital system. They found a faded carton box on the furthest shelf, its label peeling. It read, "Unidentified female remains, 1985. Doyle." Opening the box released a musty smell of paper and damp plastic. Inside, sealed nylon bags held a H. Doyle signature. A brown envelope contained light blonde hair, another a dark denim scrap, a third a distorted bullet and small bones. Emily stared at the items under dim neon light and said, "My God, this has been here over 30 years. Johnson nodded, his voice dry. "Not the only one. Most are forgotten. That afternoon, Emily returned to her desk, opened NAMUS, and searched female remains. Tallapoosa 1985, no results. The 1986 typo marked it invalid, hiding it from searches. For over 30 years, the remains were excluded from missing persons matches. She sat still, hand on the mouse, staring at no record found. A chill ran through her. Without a fix, the girl would stay forgotten. That evening, Emily filed an internal report requesting a re-examination of Jane Doe #8507 evidence, citing Alabama's new pre-1990 cold case DNA testing rule. In the analyst field, she wrote a name she wasn't sure was still active: Noah Green, retired forensic DNA specialist. She recalled Green from an old article on DNA-solved cases. Her email to him was brief: "Mr. Green, I found a 1985 case that may have been overlooked. Can you help review?" 2 days later, her office phone rang. A slow, deep voice said, "I read your email. If the hair has roots, we can extract DNA. Send me the details." Emily explained the typo, the evidence box, and the file's absence from the system. After a pause, Noah said, "One wrong letter can cost 30 years. You did the right thing." By late April, Emily completed the re-examination request. The evidence box was resealed, labeled Cold Case Review, Tallapoosa County, #8507. She watched the transport team take it, feeling a long open door close. As the vault shut, the fluorescent light flickered off. The inventory log gained a new entry: re-examination request approved, ADF's forensic DNA unit. That night, in her small Montgomery apartment, Emily opened her laptop, typing a brief work journal entry: Case 8507, typo, not entered in NAMUS, reopened April 26, 2018. Sent to Noah Green. She paused, then added, "If the DNA holds, the Tallapoosa girl will have a name." In early January 2019, evidence box #8507 arrived at ADF's Montgomery lab. Under cold white light, old nylon bags were laid out on a glass table. Noah Green, his hair now white, carefully cut open the hairbag with a scalpel. A faint crackle of dry plastic released a musty scent, paper dust, and a hint of buried memory. Inside was light blonde hair, some strands caked with dirt. Under a microscope, Green saw 3 intact follicles. He exhaled, turning to Emily beside him. "We've got a real shot." He began extraction, rinsing the sample in phosphate solution, spinning it in a centrifuge, filtering DNA. Each step was deliberate, a ritual from decades of reading invisible cellular traces. When the final clear solution entered the PCR machine, Green said, "If the DNA's good, we'll have results in 48 hours. His eyes stayed on the cycling display. Emily stood silent, tension filling the room. 34 years hinged on a few microliters of liquid. 2 days later, the electrophoresis results appeared, sharp genetic markers forming a full DNA profile. Green could hardly believe it. He saved the data in CODIS format and sent a copy to GED Match, a database of millions of American genealogical profiles. "If her family tested, we'll find them," he said. Emily nodded, sitting beside him, eyes locked on the loading bar. 3 days later, Green's inbox pinged, "One potential familial match found." He opened it, a 95% second-degree genetic match with the Lang family in Huntsville, Alabama. Emily froze. "Lang? Rebecca Lang?" she whispered. Green searched Alabama's missing persons database. Rebecca Lang, female, 19, missing August 14, 1981, Lineville, Alabama. File CL 80-1274, closed. Her hand gripped the table, heart racing. 38 years ago, the case was closed as a voluntary disappearance. Green contacted GED Match for further tracing. They confirmed the DNA submitter, David Lang, Rebecca's brother, in Huntsville. Green called Emily, "We need to contact the family. If they agree, a reference sample will confirm." 2 days later, David called. His voice was hoarse, halting. "You're saying, there's a chance you found Rebecca?" Emily spoke slowly. We can't confirm yet, but there's reason to believe a 1985 unidentified case might be her." A long silence followed. David said, "I'll take the test. I've hoped for years." David Lang's cheek swab arrived via express courier. Green processed it himself, comparing mitochondrial DNA with the unidentified hair sample. The sequences matched 99.9%. He leaned back, silent for a moment. After 34 years, Jane Doe #8507 had a name. He printed the results, placing them before Emily. She read the conclusion, voice trembling. DNA sample fully matches David Lang's maternal line. Victim Jane Doe #8507 identified as Rebecca Lang, missing 1981. In March 2019, ADFS's identification results prompted the Alabama Bureau of Investigation to reopen Rebecca Lang's case. A special task force, Cold Case 81 Lang, was formed with 3 experienced investigators, a forensic expert, and 2 archival analysts. Their first document was Emily Carter and Noah Green's report. DNA from Jane Doe #8507 hair matches 99.9%, with David Lang's maternal line, victim identified as Rebecca Lang, missing 1981, Lineville. The phrase, reclassified as homicide, was bolded mid-page. On the Montgomery meeting table, a Clay County map marked key locations: Highway Diner, Tallapoosa Bridge, and the Mustang's discovery site. Lead investigator Special Agent Thomas Keegan, a 20-year ABI veteran, stared at an old photo of the abandoned yellow Mustang. "This wasn't a disappearance," he said firmly. "This was murder, and someone made everyone believe she ran away." The room fell silent. Outside, March sunlight slanted through blinds, casting pale gold across the wooden table. Their first step was reviewing old evidence. Box #8507, now labeled Rebecca Lang, 1981 homicide evidence, moved from ADFS to ABI's tech lab. Technicians photographed each item: distorted bullet, denim scrap, remaining hair, soil on bones, and a copy of Dr. Louis Carr's forensic report. Keegan pointed at the bullet in a steel tray. "Tell me everything we can about this bullet." In the ballistics lab, a technician examined the distorted bullet under a comparison microscope. Blue light revealed rifling marks like metal fingerprints. He noted, .38 caliber, 5 left twist grooves, characteristic of Smith & Wesson Model 10, standard police sidearm in the 70s and 80s. A Clay County ballistics report from the old archive confirmed similar rounds issued to the sheriff and deputies then. Keegan nodded, voice low. So the bullet in her head wasn't from a drifter. It belonged to someone authorized to carry. By mid-month, the team obtained a 1981 weapons issuance log from the state archive. Yellowed pages listed serial numbers and signatures. Keegan paused at entry 47, S&W Model 10, serial 38127, issued to Sheriff Hank Doyle. The room went still. That name appeared repeatedly in the old file. The man who led Rebecca's search and signed the "No foul play found" report. Keegan leaned back, hands clasped. Doyle was at every key point. He opened and closed the case, controlled evidence, and per this log, was the only one in the county issued a Model 10 that year. Another agent asked, could someone have borrowed or stolen his gun? Keegan shook his head. No evidence of that, and if so, why didn't he report it missing? The team reconstructed Doyle's 1981 timeline. Personnel records showed he served as Clay County Sheriff from 1976 to 1992, retiring at 56. Described as strict and respected, but occasionally temperamental and stubborn, a 1983 report noted, retained evidence in some cases for internal review, not a serious violation, but requires oversight. Keegan underlined it in red. Forensic analysis continued. The denim scrap underwent infrared spectroscopy, synthetic indigo-dyed fibers, matching Levi's 505 jeans, which Grace Whitmore said Rebecca wore during her last shift. Chemical analysis of soil on the fabric matched Blackwood Creek Road's mineral composition, where the mysterious tire tracks were found. She was killed where she disappeared, not where the body was found. Keegan concluded. Someone moved her, and they knew the area well. On March 26, the ABI sent a formal request to the Clay County Sheriff's Office to review the 1981 archived files. Old cabinets were opened, papers brittle as if ready to crumble. In the fourth drawer, they found a copy of Doyle's report. A faded typed sheet, its final line. No foul play found. Case CL 80-1274 closed. Below was the scrawled signature, H. Doyle. Keegan stared at the text for a long time, then said, "If the man who wrote this shot that girl, then for 40 years, justice has been locked in his own filing cabinet." The cold case team pressed on with the gun investigation. The State Armory confirmed that the S&W Model 10, serial number 38127, was returned when Doyle retired in 1992. It was now stored in Prattville's old evidence vault. The ballistics technician requested a test sample. Keegan agreed instantly. "If the rifling matches the bullet in Rebecca's skull, we'll have something Doyle can't deny." As the meeting ended, Emily Carter walked in with a copy of the 1985 evidence transfer record from Clay County to Montgomery. There, H. Doyle appeared again. Same handwriting, same right-slanted script as on the case closure report. Keegan looked at the paper, then up, his eyes cold as steel. He controlled this case from the start, and now he'll face it. That evening, as the team left the headquarters, Keegan stayed behind. On the wall, a Clay County map was dotted with red pins like a spider web. Rebecca's last route, the Mustang's location, the body's discovery site, and finally, the county sheriff's office, where Doyle once sat. He circled 3 initials on the map's corner, HD, writing beside them, primary subject. The investigation was just beginning, but Keegan knew every lead pointed to the man who once led Clay County's law enforcement, now the prime suspect in the murder of a girl he swore to find. The ABI's forensic lab, on the 3rd floor of the main building, was bathed in the cold, flat glow of fluorescent lights. In the wide room, a long metal table held reopened evidence bags under new protocol, denim fabric, soil from bones, small gravel from the skull cavity, and a yellowed paper tag with handwritten text. Tallapoosa, 1985, Doyle. Special Agent Thomas Keegan watched as technicians began work. He'd learned that in cold cases like this, the smallest details, a speck of dust, a thread, often hid justice. Forensic geologist Dr. Lauren Hodge poured soil from Rebecca Lang's jawbone onto a tray. She sifted fine powder with a steel spoon, then placed it under an electron microscope. The large screen showed varied soil grains, mica flecks, reflecting light, quartz crystals, mixed with red rust powder. Hodge adjusted the focus, zooming in. "This isn't river soil," she said firmly. "The mineral composition points to alluvial land, with shale and mica fragments, exactly Blackwood Creek, not Tallapoosa." Keegan stepped closer, eyes brightening. "You're sure?" Hodge nodded, pointing at the screen. "Tallapoosa soil is mostly sand and gray silt. This is deep red, high in mica and iron oxide traces. Only Blackwood Creek has this, from shale mining in the late 70s. The room fell silent for a moment. The finding meant Rebecca died near where she vanished, not at the river where her body was found. Her remains were moved, buried, or hidden temporarily, then washed to the Tallapoosa, explaining why her bones were scattered and incomplete. Keegan scribbled in his notebook, "Primary crime scene relocated. Blackwood Creek confirmed." He turned to the team analyzing the denim. Under an optical microscope, the fabric's dark blue weave showed faint silver scratches. The technician pointed to a 4-centimeter tear, fibers cut cleanly, edges frayed from a slicing force. "Not a natural tear," he said. "This is a cut from a narrow, sharp blade, likely a military or police folding knife from that era." Keegan stared at the cut. A knife mark on the victim's clothing. "If she was shot, why a knife?" The technician replied. "Could be from a struggle, or the perpetrator removing something, cutting a pocket, a watch, or hiding evidence." Keegan nodded, his expression heavy. In his memory, Doyle's 1981 report mentioned no tears in Rebecca's clothes, only a curt, no sign of struggle. Hodge switched to a polarizing microscope to examine a thread on the tear's edge. The thin, gray-green fiber glowed faintly under light. Polyester cotton blend, she said. Common in Alabama police uniforms from the late 70s to early 80s. The words hung in the quiet room. Keegan looked up, asking slowly, "You mean this thread could be from?" Hodge finished, "From a uniform in contact during a struggle, or when the body was moved. It's not from the victim's clothes." Keegan jotted, "Uniform thread, evidence of contact." He stepped to the table, examining the denim, lightly touching its envelope. "She was wearing these jeans when she disappeared," he said softly. "And the last person to touch them might have been a cop." That afternoon, the forensic team completed a preliminary report with 3 bolded conclusions. Soil on bones matches Blackwood Creek geology, not Tallapoosa River, proving the victim was killed near the disappearance site. Denim clothing has a 4 cm knife cut, military blade, occurring before or at time of death. Gray-green thread matches Alabama police uniform fabric from the 1980s. Reading the last point, Keegan leaned back, lighting a cigarette but not smoking it. Thin smoke curled in the air, dissolving into the white light. Soil, fabric, and bullet, 3 things separated for over 30 years, finally telling the same story, he said. Someone killed Rebecca at Blackwood Creek, moved her to the river, and that person wore a uniform. That evening, as technicians left, Keegan lingered alone. He studied an old photo of Doyle in the file, a large man in uniform, stiff smile, badge gleaming. Below was the caption, "Sheriff of Clay County, 1976, 1992. Keegan tapped his pen. "Same fabric, same gun model, same signature on the file," he muttered. "And now, the soil pulls him back to Blackwood Creek." The next morning, he called Emily Carter at ADFS. "Lauren confirmed the soil and thread. Everything points to the old scene," he said. On the other end, Emily's voice cracked with emotion. "I know. I saw the report. It's like nothing ever left Clay County." Keegan paused, then said, "We're going back there, Emily. 38 years later, I want to see exactly where it all started." That afternoon, the cold case team drove from Montgomery to Lineville. As the car turned onto the old Blackwood Creek Trail, red dust coated the windshield, the sun setting behind pines. Ahead, the water flowed quietly over rocks, where yellow tape once stretched. Now only faint marks on wooden stakes remained. Keegan stepped out, standing silently, gazing at the deep red earth glowing in the dusk. "We found her here," he said, voice low. "And right here, I'll find who made her disappear." Back in Montgomery, the Cold Case 81 Lang team searched unopened evidence boxes in Clay County's old archive. A cold room under dim fluorescent lights, smelling of moldy paper and rusted metal. Special Agent Thomas Keegan and forensic technician Lauren Hodge sifted through boxes, checking labels. On a low wooden shelf, they found an unmarked carton. A faded marker label read, "Lang, Personal Effects." Hodge, gloved, gently opened it. Inside a yellowed plastic bag was a single item, a small silver earring engraved with RL. The room grew heavy. Keegan leaned in. It was an 80s women's earring, thin and round, with a spiral pattern and hand-carved initials. He recognized RL Rebecca Lang. The matching earring was likely lost in the attack. But this one, why was it in the county vault, never logged? "It's not in the 1981 seizure list," Hodge said softly. "Nor in the 1985 Jane Doe report." Keegan photographed the bag's label, then ordered it resealed for fingerprint analysis. The next day, results arrived. The bag held 2 prints, one faint, one clear. The faint matched Rebecca's high school fingerprint file, no surprise. But the clear print, inside the plastic, stunned them, a perfect match to Sheriff Hank Doyle's 1980 personnel file from when he became sheriff. The forensic report stated, "Fingerprint match confirmed, 12 points identical." Keegan set the paper down, staring at 12 points. It wasn't a random error, there was no reason for Doyle's prints, inside a sealed evidence bag, unless he placed it there. He called retired Deputy Mark Hensley, who worked under Doyle, for confirmation. Hensley paused, then said, "I remember that case. When we found her car, we didn't recover any jewelry or personal items. All sealed evidence went to Doyle. If there's an earring, he kept it." That afternoon, Keegan and 2 agents visited Doyle at his Prattville home. Now nearly 80, thinner, with white hair, his eyes still sharp, and voice carrying its old authority. When Keegan showed the earring photo, Doyle glanced at it, leaned back in his armchair, and said in a low tone, "I remember that. Found it in the car, no one confirmed it was hers. Kept it as a sample. Small thing, don't make a fuss." Keegan held his gaze. "You kept evidence without logging it." "Why?" Doyle shrugged. "It was filed as a missing person case. No one saw it as a crime. I didn't know it'd turn into murder evidence later." Keegan paused, then placed the fingerprint results before him. "The issue isn't that you found it, but that you kept it, and you held it for 38 years. Doyle gave a tired chuckle. "You think I was hiding something? A thing that small becomes a crime. I solved hundreds of cases. Sometimes I kept things for comparison. The county vault had no space." His voice stayed calm, but his eyes flickered with unease. As the agents left, Keegan paused at the door, saying firmly, "Keeping evidence unreported is a violation, Mr. Doyle. From now on, everything you touched will be re-examined." Doyle watched them, lips pressed tight. "You think you understand this case," he said, voice rough. "Not everything's by the book." The door slammed shut behind them. That evening, in the ABI office, Keegan read the latest report, "Unauthorized possession of evidence confirmed." Subject, Hank Doyle, former sheriff, Clay County. Below, the legal advisor noted, "Violation of evidence storage protocol, per Section 24, Alabama law enforcement regulations, may warrant criminal prosecution if intent to conceal is proven." Keegan leaned back, flipping the silver earring photo. The hand-carved RL gleamed under the desk lamp, like eyes staring from the past. He recalled Hodge's words, "The thread on the victim's clothes matches police uniform fabric." Now, an earring with the former sheriff's fingerprints. Doyle, who led the search, declared, "No foul play found." Scattered pieces were aligning, like moldy puzzle fragments from the deepest past. 38 years ago, he closed the case. "Now I'll reopen it," Keegan said softly, voice firm. He wrote the final line in the report to the ABI director. Subject Doyle, to be formally classified as primary suspect pending ballistic confirmation. Outside, Montgomery's sky darkened, streetlights streaking the glass. On the desk, the small earring sat among files, RL etched deeper in the light. For the first time in nearly 4 decades, the evidence was in the right hands. Those seeking true justice, not locked in the drawer of the man who swore to protect it. The ABI's biology lab, blocks from the administrative wing, was isolated to secure samples. On the last morning of April, as dawn filtered through frosted glass, technician Sarah Whitman opened a resealed envelope with the denim scrap from prior analysis. Under a lope, the gray-green fabric had faded, but a dark stain like old mud remained. "This is the area suspected of epithelial cells," she said, pointing for Special Agent Thomas Keegan and Dr. Noah Green. They knew that after nearly 40 years, human DNA was a long shot. But if present, it could be the final link tying Doyle to the victim. Sarah dripped phosphate solution onto the fabric, gently swabbing the surface. The sample went into a vial, coded sample D81. The room held only the hum of the air filter and her scribbling notes. Green watched each step, eyes focused. "If there's male skin cells," he said, "we'll amplify YSTR. It's more stable than autosomal DNA." Keegan nodded, his gaze steady. Weeks of evidence, bullet, uniform thread, earring with Doyle's prints, pointed to him. This, if successful, would be undeniable. 2 days later, preliminary results silenced the room. The screen's fluorescence graph showed a clear YSTR sequence, male chromosome markers. The denim sample held male epithelial cells. Green squinted, reading the automated report. Male contributor detected. High confidence. He exhaled. We have male DNA. The question is, whose? Keegan ordered a cross-check with CODIS. No matches. No one in the system had that profile. He turned to Green. If Doyle's the killer, his sample wouldn't be in CODIS. But what about his family? Green looked up. His son, if alive, could provide a Y-DNA comparison. It passes intact from father to son. Keegan checked Doyle's old personnel file. A note under dependents, Michael Doyle, born 1964, current address, Prattville. Keegan called the prosecutor's office. 2 days later, Michael Doyle's attorney agreed to a DNA sample to rule out family involvement. Keegan and Green collected it, a simple cheek swab. The 55-year-old man, neatly trimmed hair and stern face, nodded when Keegan explained the process, saying softly, "If it proves my father's innocent, do it. He's old. He can't take more rumors." 48 hours later, Michael's sample was entered. Green compared the Y-star sequences from the denim and the reference. The screen showed 2 identical graphs, 23 loci perfectly aligned. The software concluded, Y-star match indicates direct paternal link. Green sat still, then printed the results. That line meant the DNA on the victim's clothes came from a direct male relative of Michael Doyle, biologically only his father, Hank Doyle. Keegan read the report slowly, voice hoarse. Y-star match, direct paternal link. Probability Doyle is the DNA source, 99.7%. He looked at Green. No way he can deny this. Green nodded, voice low. We don't need fingerprints or a confession. 1 cell is enough. They prepared a report for the ABI director. Keegan wrote, biological analysis of sample D81 reveals male epithelial traces. Y-star analysis confirms a perfect match with Michael Doyle's DNA, son of Hank Doyle. This proves the DNA on the evidence belongs to a direct male lineage with Hank Doyle. Conclusion: the DNA source is most likely former Sheriff Hank Doyle. The report was stamped confidential. Evidence verified. Keegan placed it before the director. He led the search, signed the closure, kept evidence, and now his DNA is on the victim's clothes. Keegan said, "This isn't suspicion, it's proof." In the internal meeting, the ABI legal advisor confirmed the evidence chain was valid, with no procedural violations. The DNA was obtained with consent, and isn't tied to the provider's criminality, she said. It's sufficient to establish a genetic link and grounds for a search warrant, even an arrest. That evening, under dim office light, Keegan studied a whiteboard covered with images. The Mustang, Blackwood Creek map, the RL earring, and now the Y-star graph with matching waves. He lit a cigarette, smoke curling slowly. He thought he erased everything, he muttered, but left himself on her clothes. Across town, Hank Doyle sat alone in his small Prattville wooden house, watching the evening news. The anchor reported the ABI's expanded investigation into Rebecca Lang's case. He switched off the TV, leaning back, eyes cloudy, as he stared out the window. Outside, the dusk faded, reflecting on his old badge on the wall, Sheriff of Clay County. For a fleeting moment, his face showed exhaustion mixed with something unnamed, guilt, or just the shadow of a memory he'd tried to bury for nearly 4 decades. Back in Montgomery, Keegan closed the freshly printed file, its bold cover summarizing, subject, Hank Doyle, source DNA, confirmed. He stood, gazing out the window as streetlights flickered on in the evening dusk, and said softly, "Now, he's not just a name in an old file, he's the last one who touched Rebecca Lang." On the morning of early May 2019, Special Agent Thomas Keegan leaned against the glass door, watching technicians secure a Smith & Wesson Model 10 in the test chamber's mount. The gun had dulled to a silvery gray, its grip darkened by time. Etched faintly on the frame was serial number 38127, the same number logged in the 1981 issuance record, with H. Doyle signed beside it. This is the one he turned in when he retired in 1992. Technician Raymond Keller said, pulling on blue nitrile gloves. Stored well, barrel untouched. Keegan nodded slightly, eyes tracking each preparation. On a nearby table, the distorted bullet from Rebecca Lang's evidence box sat under a comparison microscope, the last remnant of her death. Half the lead was deformed, but its rifling grooves remained intact. Keller switched on the spotlight, positioning the gun in the chamber. We'll use standard .38 special ammo, clean barrel, low pressure. I want to see if the rifling matches. The trigger clicked softly, the bullet piercing a ballistic gel block and lodging in a sand trap. Keller retrieved the test bullet, placed it on a glass slide, and adjusted the focus. The large screen displayed two images side by side on the left. The 1985 bullet from Rebecca's skull, on the right, the fresh bullet from Doyle's Model 10. In the cold blue light, the grooves stood out, 5 left twist rifling marks, depth and curvature perfectly aligned. Keller measured each metric with a digital caliper, groove width, twist rate, angle. After 10 minutes, he looked up, voice low, match, 100%. Not a micron off. The room went silent. Keegan stepped closer, studying the overlaid images, the grooves like a gun's metallic fingerprint. No doubt left, he said quietly. The bullet in her head came from Doyle's gun. For certainty, Keller fired 3 more test rounds at different angles and distances. The results held every groove, every barrel mark, matched perfectly. He moved to reconstruct the shooting scene. A 3D gel model of a human head was placed on an angled table, tilted 25 degrees. The skull wound shows the bullet traveled back to front. 10 degrees right, Keller explained. Given Rebecca's average height, the shooter stood about 30 to 40 centimeters taller. He measured, adjusted the model, and fired at the corresponding angle. The trajectory matched the 1985 forensic report almost exactly. Keller said slowly, shot at a 25-degree angle, 0.5 to 1.2 meters range. Powder burns indicate a close shot. The shooter was near, the victim stationary. This angle suggests 2 scenarios: the shooter was elevated, or the victim was kneeling. The room fell silent again. Keegan stared at the simulation. The mannequin's head tilted, the bullet piercing the exact skull spot. She was kneeling, he said slowly, almost to himself. She knelt before she was shot. Keller nodded, confirming without words. Every sign pointed to no random shooting. It was an execution. By day's end, the lab completed a 26-page official ballistics report. The conclusion was bolded. Recovered bullet from victim's skull matches the rifling characteristics of S&W Model 10, serial No. 38127. Match certainty, 100%. Directional and angular analysis indicates near-contact shot fired at downward trajectory. Victim likely kneeling at time of discharge. Keegan read the conclusion aloud to the team that afternoon. All eyes were on him. No one spoke. Finally, he closed the file, voice low and firm. The gun, the bullet, DNA, fingerprints, and personal effects all point to one man, Hank Doyle. The ABI's legal team immediately prepared an arrest warrant application. The ballistics report, signed by the Alabama Forensic Sciences Director, was attached as central evidence. Prosecutor Janet Hall typed the final summary. Physical and biological evidence shows suspect Hank Doyle shot victim Rebecca Lang around August 1981 with his personal S&W Model 10. Serial 38127, then led and manipulated the investigation to conceal it. Keegan sat at the meeting table, hands clasped. He recalled Doyle's interview, his cold stare, unnervingly calm voice. If he knew what we have now, he'd know it's over, Keegan said. All nodded. We just need a judge's signature. Then everything he tried to bury under the Tallapoosa will come to light. That evening, as the team dispersed, Keegan returned to the ballistics lab one last time. Under the microscope, the two bullets lay side by side, grooves matching perfectly. One from 1981, one from 2019. He stared for a long moment, then said softly, "Same shot, but this time it didn't kill. It spoke." Outside the glass, Montgomery sank into night, yellow streetlights streaking like veins in a warming body. On the table, the technical report lay neat, its final page signed by Thomas Keegan, bolded heading, "Recommendation, proceed with arrest warrant for Hank Doyle, homicide, Rebecca Lang." As he switched off the light and left, the last glow reflected on the old silver gun, silent in the evidence vault for nearly 3 decades. Now the final witness speaking for a girl whose voice was stolen. On the morning of September 3, 2019, Prattville was still fogged as an ABI convoy entered a quiet South Side neighborhood. The lead car's red light spun slowly, siren off. Special Agent Thomas Keegan sat in the passenger seat, holding a search and arrest warrant signed by a Montgomery federal judge, a red seal stark on the corner. Hank Doyle, suspected homicide. For a moment, Keegan peered through the misted window, seeing the 2-story wooden house emerge behind pines, the home Doyle had lived in for nearly 30 years since retiring. At 6:27 a.m., the agents approached. Doyle sat on the porch, coffee mug on the table, a small radio playing the morning news. Seeing the ABI cars park, he only raised his head slightly. Keegan stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "Mr. Doyle, under Alabama court order, we have a warrant to search your home and arrest you for first-degree murder." Doyle set the mug down, eyes steady, a faint smirk. 38 years, and you finally came. Come in." He didn't resist. The house was searched with 2 local witnesses and a state legal representative present. Upstairs, the office was tidy. Law books, notepads, and a wall photo of Doyle in uniform, smiling under his Clay County badge. Keegan ordered the safe behind the bookshelf checked. Doyle claimed it held only pension papers and mementos. A technician opened it with a key from the desk. As the door swung open, the room went still. Inside, wrapped tightly in oiled cloth, was a Smith & Wesson Model 10. Same model, same gray steel, serial 38127, etched on the barrel. Keegan signaled Hodge to inspect. Gloved, she lifted the gun, shining a light. "No dust, no oil, but wiped clean," she said. Someone kept it carefully. As the technician logged it, Doyle sat, eyes forward, voice calm. "I turned that gun in back in '92. Maybe this is a display copy." Keegan replied, voice low but cold. "No copy has your hand-etched mark, Hank." He pointed to a faint carving under the grip, a small HD, a habit Doyle was known for in the county, etching his initials on his guns. The team photographed, sealed the evidence, and logged it on site. Reading the Miranda rights, Keegan spoke clearly. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court." Doyle gave a tired smile, nodded, and said hoarsely, "I know the process better than you think." He extended his hands, letting agents cuff him without resistance. Outside, neighbors gathered behind fences, whispering. An elderly woman said shakily, "My God, Hank Doyle arrested." Another replied, "The old sheriff must be a mistake." Back in Montgomery, the Cold Case 81 Lang team searched unopened evidence boxes in Clay County's old archive. A cold room under dim fluorescent lights, smelling of moldy paper and rusted metal. Special Agent Thomas Keegan and forensic technician Lauren Hodge sifted through boxes, checking labels. On a low wooden shelf, they found an unmarked carton. A faded marker label read, "Lang, Personal Effects." Hodge, gloved, gently opened it. Inside a yellowed plastic bag was a single item, a small silver earring engraved with RL. The room grew heavy. Keegan leaned in. It was an 80s women's earring, thin and round, with a spiral pattern and hand-carved initials. He recognized RL Rebecca Lang. The matching earring was likely lost in the attack. But this one, why was it in the county vault, never logged? "It's not in the 1981 seizure list," Hodge said softly. Nor in the 1985 Jane Doe report. Keegan photographed the bag's label, then ordered it resealed for fingerprint analysis. The next day, results arrived. The bag held 2 prints, one faint, one clear. The faint matched Rebecca's high school fingerprint file, no surprise. But the clear print, inside the plastic, stunned them, a perfect match to Sheriff Hank Doyle's 1980 personnel file from when he became sheriff. The forensic report stated, fingerprint match confirmed, 12 points identical. Keegan set the paper down, staring at 12 points. It wasn't a random error, there was no reason for Doyle's prints inside a sealed evidence bag unless he placed it there. He called retired Deputy Mark Hensley, who worked under Doyle, for confirmation. Hensley paused, then said, I remember that case. When we found her car, we didn't recover any jewelry or personal items. All sealed evidence went to Doyle. If there's an earring, he kept it. That afternoon, Keegan and 2 agents visited Doyle at his Prattville home. Now nearly 80, thinner, with white hair, his eyes still sharp, and voice carrying its old authority. When Keegan showed the earring photo, Doyle glanced at it, leaned back in his armchair, and said in a low tone, I remember that. Found it in the car, no one confirmed it was hers. Kept it as a sample. Small thing, don't make a fuss. Keegan held his gaze. You kept evidence without logging it. Why? Doyle shrugged. It was filed as a missing person case. No one saw it as a crime. I didn't know it'd turn into murder evidence later. Keegan paused, then placed the fingerprint results before him. The issue isn't that you found it, but that you kept it, and you held it for 38 years. Doyle gave a tired chuckle. You think I was hiding something? A thing that small becomes a crime. I solved hundreds of cases. Sometimes I kept things for comparison. The county vault had no space. His voice stayed calm, but his eyes flickered with unease. As the agents left, Keegan paused at the door, saying firmly, keeping evidence unreported is a violation, Mr. Doyle. From now on, everything you touched will be re-examined. Doyle watched them, lips pressed tight. You think you understand this case, he said, voice rough. Not everything's by the book. The door slammed shut behind them. That evening, in the ABI office, Keegan read the latest report, unauthorized possession of evidence confirmed. Subject, Hank Doyle, former sheriff, Clay County. Below, the legal advisor noted, violation of evidence storage protocol, per Section 24, Alabama law enforcement regulations, may warrant criminal prosecution if intent to conceal is proven. The next week, the forensic team finalized a comprehensive report. The cover page's bolded title read, State of Alabama v. Hank Doyle. Case number 19 CR 1172. Summary of evidence, minus DNA from victim's clothing contains male epithelial cells, YSTR matching Michael Doyle's paternal line, Hank Doyle's son. Minus .38 caliber bullet from victim's skull matches 100% with S&W Model 10. Serial 38127, registered to Hank Doyle. Fingerprint in RL earring bag matches Doyle. Soil and thread on victim's clothing match Blackwood Creek and 1980s Alabama police uniform fabric. Doyle withheld evidence, failed to report, and closed the 1981 case himself. We have it all, Janet Hall said, closing the file. Time to go to court. On September 20th, the 47-page indictment was filed with Montgomery's Superior Court. It concluded Doyle intentionally shot Rebecca Lang at Blackwood Creek on the night of August 14, 1981, then moved her body to the Tallapoosa River to stage the scene and led a sham investigation to erase traces. Additional charges included abuse of authority, falsifying reports, and evidence destruction. At a brief press conference, Prosecutor Hall declared, "We're not just prosecuting a murder, we're prosecuting a betrayal by someone who represented justice." The news stunned Alabama. Many in Clay County, where Doyle was once the last keeper of order, couldn't believe it. But for those who lived in fear and doubt for 4 decades, it was a final answer to an old mystery. On the defense side, Doyle's legal team, led by veteran criminal attorney Samuel Trent, filed a counter-motion. The physical evidence in this case is over 38 years old, stored through multiple conditions. There's no guarantee the DNA and ballistics chain wasn't contaminated or altered. Conclusions from old samples lack absolute legal weight. At the preliminary hearing on September 27, Trent stood at the podium, voice booming, "You're trying to convict an 80-year-old man based on a faint earring print and DNA that could belong to any male relative. The law doesn't allow conviction by genetic inference." He stressed the last word, staring at the prosecution. Hall countered swiftly, without notes. "This isn't inference. We have a complete evidence chain, DNA matching the paternal line, a bullet matching his personal gun, direct fingerprints, evidence seized at his home, and most critically, the suspect alone accessed and closed the original file. That's intentional criminal conduct." Judge Clarence Moore, presiding, listened silently for nearly 2 hours. At the end, he read his ruling. "Given the physical and biological evidence provided by the prosecution, there is sufficient basis for criminal charges. The court approves a formal preliminary trial on November 14, 2019, at Montgomery County Courthouse." The news erupted from the courtroom. Headlines blared, "Alabama Court Approves Trial for Former Sheriff Hank Doyle in Rebecca Lang Murder. Cold Case, 1981. Keegan and Emily stood in the courthouse hallway. She looked at him, voice choked. "We brought her out of the dark." Keegan replied softly, eyes on the TV cameras. "Yes, but this is just the start. The court needs to hear Rebecca's voice, and I want them to know she's more than a file." That afternoon, as the crowd dispersed, Doyle was taken to temporary holding in Montgomery, awaiting trial. He said nothing, only glancing out the transport van's small window, where late sunlight filtered through iron bars, casting long streaks across his aged face. A reporter shouted, "Sheriff Doyle, anything to say?" He pressed his lips, answering slowly, just loud enough for the mic. "It all started with a rainy night." The vague remark became a standout quote on WSFA News that evening. Former sheriff's cryptic remark ahead of trial, "It all started with one rainy night." In the ABI office late that night, Keegan added a red line to the caseboard, Case 81 Lang Trial Confirmed. November 14, 2019. He turned off the light, leaving Rebecca Lang's photo on the wall. She smiled in her old diner uniform, as if watching Justice's slow steps, lost for nearly 4 decades, but finally returning to her. On the morning of November 14, 2019, Montgomery County Courthouse was packed. Crowds lined the hallway early, reporters jostled behind iron railings, microphones and cameras aimed at the main door. The heavy wooden door opened, and Hank Doyle, nearing 83, entered between 2 marshals, hands uncuffed, but gait slow and stiff. He wore an old gray suit, white shirt, tie neatly knotted. Though aged, he carried the bearing of a former Clay County authority. Camera flashes fired as he sat at the defense table, eyes forward, head unbowed. At the prosecution's bench, Janet Hall stood, her voice ringing through the cold courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court, today we don't just try a crime, we try a betrayal by a man entrusted with the law." A 19-year-old girl, Rebecca Lang, vanished from Lineville in 1981, and the man tasked with finding her was the one who killed her. The courtroom fell silent. Doyle sat still, hands clasped on his lap. On Hall's table, 7 thick files were stacked, each marking a case phase. She opened the first, presenting the forensic chain of logic, a seamless evidence sequence proving the defendant's guilt. She began with the DNA. Male cells found on the victim's denim in 2019 matched YSTR with Michael Doyle, the defendant's son. YSTR is unchanged across male generations, so the source is Hank Doyle. On a large screen, YSTR graphs showed identical signals. Hall stated clearly, "Not doubt, not guesswork. This is a direct genetic trace of a man who held Justice's mantle but stained his hands with blood." Next, she presented the ballistics report. The distorted bullet from Rebecca's 1985 skull matched 100% with the S&W Model 10. Serial 38127, surrendered by Doyle at retirement. Under the microscope, the rifling grooves aligned perfectly, left twists identical to the millimeter. Hall pointed to the screen, voice icy. "This is the gun's fingerprint, and this gun bears his name." The courtroom hushed. Some Clay County residents bowed their heads, a few wiped tears. Hall continued. "Then the personal item, a silver earring engraved RL, found in Clay County's vault, in a sealed bag with the defendant's fingerprints. Doyle called it an unclaimed sample, but no sample is kept 38 years in a sheriff's private safe." The prosecution called Emily Carter as the first witness. In a black suit, petite but sharp-eyed, her voice steady, she recounted discovering the unidentified typo in NamUs, tracing Jane Doe #8507, and contacting Noah Green for DNA re-examination. When Hall asked, "Miss Carter, if you hadn't found that typo, would this case have reopened?" she looked up, answering slowly, "No. One wrong letter kept her hidden for 30 years. I just fixed it." Next, Dr. Noah Green took the stand. Holding the DNA report, he spoke plainly. "When I extracted DNA from the victim's hair, I knew we faced something Doyle's era couldn't imagine. Technology doesn't forget, even if people try." Pointing to the gene sequence on the screen, he said, "This code is Rebecca Lang, and this code is the man who last touched her. Science doesn't lie." Defense attorney Samuel Trent stood, objecting, "Your Honor, we don't dispute scientific progress, but this is nearly 40-year-old evidence. There's no proof. The samples weren't contaminated in storage." Hall turned, voice calm but firm. "If contaminated, it would show mixed DNA, but the result is a pure YS tar, matching the defendant's son perfectly. It can't be fabricated." The judge nodded, taking notes. That afternoon, the prosecution presented its final piece, a 1981 radio tape restored from an old analog reel recently digitized. Hall approached the player and pressed play. A crackling sound filled the room, then a man's voice, hoarse, distinct, unmistakable, Unit 2 clear. "Nothing left by the river." Hank Doyle's voice, the night of August 15th, 1981, reporting the search's end after finding tire tracks at the Tallapoosa. The packed courtroom fell utterly silent. Some stared at Doyle, others at each other. Emily Carter bowed her head, hands clenched. Hall faced the jury, voice low. "The man on this tape didn't lie. He was right. Nothing was left by the river, because he took it all away." Doyle sat still, staring into space, expression nearly blank. Trent touched his shoulder, whispering, but Doyle didn't respond. He only slowly tapped 2 fingers on the table's edge, a nervous habit many in Clay County had seen when he was stressed. As Hall concluded, the judge called a recess until the next morning for the defense's response. Reporters flooded out, while inside, late sunlight streamed through high windows, falling on empty seats. Emily stood quietly, gazing at the screen, still showing Rebecca Lang, the 19-year-old smiling in her old diner uniform. Noah Green stepped beside her, saying softly, "We brought her home, at least this way." She nodded, voice hoarse, "Yes, but justice doesn't bring people back. It just stops the guilty from hiding forever." In the corner, Keegan gathered evidence documents, sealing them in a bag labeled State v. Doyle, Exhibit Evidence. He glanced at the defendant's bench one last time. Doyle sat there, silent, eyes fixed on the screen, where Rebecca's face faded as the lights dimmed. That evening, WSFA News replayed the Unit 2 clear audio, interspersed with footage of Doyle, escorted to the van. The anchor said, "A 38-year-old tape silenced the courtroom. The prosecution believes, with this evidence, the truth has finally spoken. Not in words, but in the voice of the man who hid it." On the screen, the final frame froze on Doyle, silver hair, vacant stare, hands clenched before him. In the courtroom, no verdict had been spoken, but the audience knew. The night by the river in 1981 was no longer a mystery. It had a voice, Hank Doyle's hoarse voice, the one that said, "Nothing left by the river." And indeed, in 1981, by the Tallapoosa River, nothing remained but guilt. On the morning of November 18, 2019, the Montgomery County Courthouse entered the 5th day of the trial. The air in the courtroom was heavy, as if it could be sliced with a knife. After a brief defense rebuttal, where Samuel Trent repeated that time erodes truth, and human memory is unreliable, Judge Clarence Moore announced the jury would deliberate. The 12 jurors left their seats for a private room. The door closed, leaving behind a thick silence. For the next 6 hours, time seemed to stop. Doyle sat still in the defendant's chair, hands on his chest, eyes staring blankly at the wall. No one spoke. Emily Carter sat in the front row, holding a silver-framed photo of Rebecca Lang she'd brought from ADFS. Special Agent Keegan leaned against a wooden pillar in the back, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the silver-haired man he'd pursued for a year, and indirectly for nearly 4 decades. At noon, as sunlight slanted through the courtroom's high windows, a knock sounded. The jury had a verdict. The door opened, and 12 solemn faces filed in. Judge Moore asked curtly, "Have you reached a decision?" The jury foreman replied, voice firm, "Your Honor, we have unanimously, without further discussion." The courtroom buzzed, then fell silent. The judge signaled the clerk to read the paper aloud in the still room. In the case of State of Alabama v. Hank Doyle, on the charge of first-degree murder, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. A murmur rippled through the room, then stopped. Doyle didn't move. He sat upright, eyes forward, face unchanged. Keegan felt his chest tighten, not from joy, but from an empty weight. A lifetime, an entire case, distilled into 2 words: guilty. Judge Moore struck his gavel, voice low. "Hank Doyle, the Montgomery County Court, State of Alabama, finds you guilty of first-degree murder under Section 13A62 of the Alabama Criminal Code. Given the crime's severity, the betrayal of public trust, and prolonged concealment, the court sentences you to life imprisonment without parole." A long silence followed. The clerk's pen scratched rapidly, wooden chairs creaked, and then a choked sob rose from the back row. Rebecca's cousin, who hadn't missed a single hearing. Doyle glanced toward the sound, but his eyes held no remorse, only heavy fatigue. Hall, the prosecutor, stood. Her voice, not loud, rang clear. Justice was buried for 38 years, but justice never dies. It only waits for those brave enough to dig it up. The courtroom rose, many nodding, some clasping hands. Emily Carter's eyes welled, clutching Rebecca's photo. Keegan touched her shoulder, voice hoarse. She got to say her name again, and be heard. 2 marshals approached to cuff Doyle. The metallic clink echoed coldly. As they touched his shoulder, he didn't resist. The judge asked, "Does the defendant wish to speak before the court concludes?" Doyle looked up, eyes cloudy, voice low and hoarse. "I lived my life, thinking I could hide a mistake under paperwork, but that mistake outlived me. I don't ask forgiveness. I just want no one else to vanish like she did." His voice trailed off as he lowered his head. No one knew if it was a confession or an old man's exhausted words. Keegan watched, heart heavy, a closing, yet a judgment on a generation that believed power was immune to guilt. As marshals led Doyle through the courtroom's center aisle, afternoon light cast a long streak across the wooden floor. He walked slowly, his shadow stretching, then vanished behind the metal door to the transport van. The door's clank was the final sound of Rebecca Lang's case. Outside, reporters swarmed. Hall stepped forward, face stern but eyes bright. Before a row of microphones, she spoke briefly. 38 years is too long for an innocent person to lie unnamed in the ground. Today justice didn't win by speed, but by persistence. Some cases seem dead, but as long as one person believes the truth endures, it lives again. Rebecca Lang is proof. The news blanketed headlines. Former Alabama sheriff sentenced to life without parole for 1981 murder. Below ran a black and white photo of Rebecca Lang, gentle smile, bright eyes, forever 19. That evening, in the ABI office, Keegan pinned a copy of the verdict to the caseboard, under the red text, Case 81 Lang. Closed. He sat, opened his notebook, and wrote a final line. When the law sleeps, some stay awake. When justice is buried, some dig it up with bare hands. Beside him, Emily set down her coffee, voice soft as a breath. She can rest now, Keegan nodded, gazing out the window at Montgomery's golden sunset. He replied, almost a whisper, and justice, though late, has come home. The story of Rebecca Lang and a case concealed for nearly 4 decades is not just a criminal tragedy, but a profound reflection on the value of responsibility, transparency, and trust in America's justice system today. A small typo, unidentified, instead of unidentified, left a woman forgotten for 40 years. And it was Emily Carter's meticulous persistence, paired with Noah Green's scientific precision, that proved a tiny system error, unchecked, can destroy a life. This story mirrors a truth in modern American society. Even the strongest institutions can falter without scrutiny and human care. The lesson extends beyond the judiciary. In any field, technology, healthcare, education, accuracy, and transparency are vital to trust. Doyle, once a law enforcement leader, became a murderer and system manipulator, a stark reminder that unchecked power breeds disaster. Alabama's Cold Case Audit 2020, launched after this case closed, symbolizes America's drive to self-correct, a society that strives to learn from mistakes, not hide them. From this story, Americans can draw a simple yet profound truth: justice doesn't exist on its own. It needs courageous, honest, meticulous people to uphold it. Every correct word, every followed protocol, every act of confronting error. These are how America keeps justice spelled right. If you believe justice, though late, is worth finding, hit subscribe to join us in uncovering more cases time forgot. Thank you for following Rebecca Lang's story. See you in the next video, where another American truth will be brought to light.